In 2013, Lady Gaga's body broke down. She had to cancel her tour. Later that year, she released her album Art Pop, which was heavily criticized. And after years of success and hits, nothing that she did seemed to resonate with the public anymore. It seemed as though they were tired of the same old Gaga tricks. And it is fair to say that it was probably one of her most difficult and chaotic times in her career and in her life. Now, many people would look back at this period and see it as a failure, maybe even something they are ashamed of, or something that they just don't want to look back at. And I'm not saying at all that this period was easy, but what we will explore in this video is that when you look at this period through an astrological perspective, you will see that this was one of the most important and transformative periods in Lady Gaga's life. A period that was without a doubt very painful for her, but it might have been that necessary evil to get her back on the right path. In this video, I would like to explore Lady Gaga's chart, and specifically her south and her north node. And in astrology, the south and north node basically represent our soul's mission, the journey that we're here to walk. And I will get into that a little bit later. But what you will discover in this video is that it is exactly those dark and painful times in Gaga's life that actually redirected her towards her soul's mission. It is what made sure that she could continue living her life and building her career in a healthier and more balanced way. But before we continue, let me introduce myself. My name is Lisanne. I'm an astrologer, and I help people navigate life's ups and downs with the help of astrology. And the story I am telling today is really a story about finding meaning in life's darkest moments and how astrology can help you understand yourself, your life, and help accept the situations that we're in with the knowledge that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that there's something better waiting for us on the other end. I'm using Gaga as an example because honestly, Lady Gaga has played a big role in my life. She used to be my biggest idol, and I simply, out of all of the celebrities, I probably know her the best. But it's really way bigger than her. Your life might not look anything like hers, but we all go through a lot of shit. Let's be honest, life is very difficult. We all face very painful situations. And I hope that this video will inspire you and maybe give you a new way of looking at your own life and the difficulties that you are facing in your life right now or in the past. But before we move on to Lady Gaga's astrology, let me first introduce you to the South and the North Node, because really they're not as well known as the Sun and the Moon and the rising sign, but in my practice, they're really the core of what I'm doing. So the South and the North Node are two opposing points in our chart, and they basically represent the purpose of your life. They answer the question, why? Why are you here? What does your soul want to experience? What does your soul want to learn? What journey are you here to travel? And if you succeed at this journey, then you will find a more fulfilled feeling than you could ever imagine. The South Node represents our past lives, and it represents the experiences and the energies that we are familiar with. So the South Node is kind of our default mode. It is the behavior and the beliefs that we fall back into time and time again just because it feels like home. We're used to it, and it feels kind of safe, even though it is exactly this behavior or these beliefs that are kind of stopping us from moving on to something better. It stops us from growing into something bigger. So the South Node really represents the limiting beliefs and the limiting behaviors and patterns that keep us stuck in life and make sure that we are not really feeling that sense of fulfillment. The North Node is kind of the remedy to the South Node issues. The North Node really represents our soul's mission, the thing that we want to experience in this lifetime, the things that we want to learn. And the thing with the North Node is that the North Node often feels very uncomfortable. And it is because our soul just doesn't really have that experience. We're not used to that kind of energy. So we're new to it. And anything that is new to us is automatically difficult. So we might feel a pull towards the North Node. You probably feel a pull towards the North Node, and you kind of feel like you want to go there, but not everyone goes there because it is scary. However, when you do go there, you will generally feel a big sense of satisfaction. Now, it is important to realize that the South Node is not necessarily only a bad thing. Because even though the South Node consists of our limiting beliefs and our limiting patterns, there is also a lot of talent and experience there. So it's not just about abandoning the South Node, it is really about rebalancing. Because what the South Node basically says is in your previous lives, or even in this life so far, you have put too much emphasis on this energy and you should move your energy somewhere else. So really, it's more of a balancing act. And maybe in order to find that balance, you might have to go first to the other extreme and fully abandon your South Node and go to the North Node. But in the end, the point is really to find the balance between the two and to really, bring the gifts that both carry together. So let's have a look at Lady Gaga's mission. Lady Gaga's South Node lies in the sign of Scorpio. And that means that she's naturally drawn towards the dark, towards intensity and extremes, towards taboos. And as weird as it might sound, Gaga finds her comfort in the dark. She finds her comfort in extremes. And as crazy as it may sound, and I realize it sounds a little bit extreme, but perhaps she even feels like she needs pain to feel alive. It's like she cannot imagine life to be good or interesting or fun without the pain, without extremes, without this intensity. Aside from Scorpio, her South Node also lies in the fifth house. And the fifth house is the house of creativity, the house of self expression, of performance, of pleasure, of being seen. And so this basically says that from past lives, she has learned I am only safe when I am seen and when I am special. And if you combine that with Scorpio, she basically has learned that in order to be recognized and in order to be special, she needs to be extreme. She needs to do the crazy stuff that other people don't dare to do. It needs to be dark, it needs to stand out because she has learned that she needs to do that in order to survive, in order to be safe and successful. The combination of the fifth house and Scorpio also says something else, and that is that she's used to put her pain into art. She's used to put those extreme and intense emotions that she has into creativity. And funny enough, a lot of people in life are seeking stability, but stability might be something that Lady Gaga fears because she might not believe that she can be creative while she is stable. She has learned that she needs to go through pain and those extremes and those intense situations in order to be creative. So having a stable life might bring up a fear of what if I cannot create, if if I don't have all of these intense things happening to me? Gaga, in her own words, actually pretty much described this fifth house Scorpio South Node. This is an old quote from an interview with Rolling Stone magazine years ago. And she said, "When I am not on stage, I feel dead. And whether it is healthy or not is really of no concern to me." And that's pretty much the Scorpio fifth house combination in a nutshell. And according to the interviewer, quote, "She bragged then about not sleeping or eating, or of living on coffee and music," which again shows these extremes. You know, these are clearly unhealthy behaviors, and yet she somehow felt a sense of pride in them. And in her latest interview with Rolling Stone, she said, "I believed in suffering for your art, but it was really not healthy for me." Now, obviously, this is her looking back already at the long career that she has had, but suffering for your art is pretty much also Scorpio in the fifth house in a nutshell. And we would almost forget that she also wrote one of the most literal songs about needing the spotlight and needing recognition when she released her song Applause, in which she literally sings, "I live for the applause and give me that thing that I love." It's like there is a sense of desperation in there that, I cannot live without it. And that is really that Scorpio fifth house influence. She needs that in order to feel alive, or at least so she believes and she thinks. Now, I want to make one thing clear. I'm saying none of this from a place of judgment, and I'm not saying that she should leave this side of her behind completely, because there is a lot of talent there. And there is a lot of energy there, because there's not just a south node there, but she also has Pluto and the moon, which I've left out in order to not overcomplicate this video. But it basically tells us that it's a very important part of her life. And not only does she need it, she's very good at it. So it's really not about leaving it behind. But the thing with Gaga is that the way she used to use this energy was really not healthy for her and really not sustainable. And that is where the North Node comes in, because she is here to have a different experience in this lifetime. She has her North Node in Taurus, and whether you believe it or not, it's actually kind of funny, but her mission in life on a personal, on a soul level, is to go back to basics, to embrace simplicity, to learn that you don't need pain or extremes or intensity for life to be good. This lifetime for her is about grounding, about taking care of herself and her body, to feel safe in her body again, and to feel safe in stability, to build a career and a life that is sustainable. She's basically here to take care of herself and her body in such a way that in 40 years she can still be on stage and she can be like the female Tony Bennett. She is here for the long run. And if she would have continued with those North Node patterns, if she would have continued living in those extremes, and I think she even said it herself, but it might not have ended so well for her. She might have become like a part of this famous Club of 27, which obviously, we're all very glad that it didn't happen. But with the South Node in Scorpio and fifth house, honestly, it wouldn't have been surprising if it did. Luckily, it seemed like she started moving towards a healthier direction now. Another thing that she's here to learn is basically that she doesn't need this pain or those extremes in order to be creative. You know, she needs to learn that she will always have access to that intensity within herself. Because with her moon in Scorpio, it's simply going to be there. She can always access that energy, but she doesn't need it in order to survive or in order to be successful. And now her North Node is also in the 11th house, which means that the focus for her in this lifetime is more on the collective. So, where in previous lifetimes she might have felt like, oh, I need to be famous and I need to be special in order to survive, this is a very, more ego driven way of acting. Now, the focus is more onto, okay, I have all of these talents. I have all of this creativity. How can I use it in order to help out the collective? And how can I use it in order to make the world a better place, in order to help people? Now, of course, there is a lot more I can say about Lady Gaga South and North Node, but for now, I would like to stop here and I would like to move on to her actual life and how these energies are working out in her life. And I would like to focus on a specific period in her life where her South Node was heavily activated and see what happened in her life and how it might have actually redirected her towards that North Node. So we will look at the period 2012 up until 2014. It is what I started this video with. It is where basically things broke down. And I want to show you how this breakdown might have been a very necessary breakdown and might have actually not been as bad as it looked, if you look back at it at least. So when you look at the years between 2012 and 2014, you can basically say that it was a period where everything that she had built on top of the South Node is starting to crack. It's starting to break. And you can see that she's sticking to the South Node strategy, but that it's no longer sticking. People are no longer buying it from her, quite literally. Now let's have a look at the things that actually happened in that period, and then I will return to the astrology to understand what was going on and why those things were happening. So up until the release of her album and single Born This Way, almost anything Gaga did turned into gold. It was hit after hit, it was constant momentum, constant visibility. But around 2012, that suddenly seemed to be shifting. And the last song that she released of the album Born This Way was called Marry the Night. And it actually became the first song that didn't reach the top 10 in the charts at that point, despite all of the promotion that was done for it. And looking back, I think it's very symbolic that she released Marry the Night as the single before everything started to kind of break down. It's almost as if unconsciously she realized what was waiting for her. She realized that she was getting ready to face the darkness within and to make peace with it somehow. So I always find that pretty symbolic and interesting in terms of the timing that that song was released. But despite that decline in the chart success, she did go on another world tour, and that tour was actually still pretty successful. Many sold out shows, and on the surface, it seemed like, everything was going well. But behind the scenes, things changed. She started actually struggling a lot with her physical health, probably mental health too, but the physical health is really the thing that we were able to see ourselves. As she said, she was going through so much pain at some point that she had to smoke about 15 joints per day just in order to numb the pain and just in order to be able to do the shows, which is, of course, pretty extreme and fits kind of in that South Note theme because clearly her body was already giving a signal of it's too much, I need a break. But Gaga, with her old patterns, she felt like she needed to push through and she couldn't stop. So she did everything in order not to feel that pain and to be able to continue until life decided to intervene and she broke her hip. And then she had to cancel her tour afterwards. Now, let's stop here for a bit and look at what was happening astrologically. So, if you look at this period, you will see that the planet Saturn was actually moving past her south node. And the planet Saturn is the planet of boundaries, the planet of blockages. People often fear Saturn because it's going to bring up things that you don't want to deal with. It's going to put blocks on the road just so you can sit back and realize that some things are no longer working and you need to take responsibility in order to move on. Basically, if something in our lives is not sustainable, if something in our lives is not working, Saturn is going to bring you the circumstances in order to take responsibility. Saturn slows us down, Saturn makes us stop, and it can be very frustrating for us, but very often it's necessary. And that is what happened here, quite literally. You know, Gaga once said, "When I'm not on stage, I feel dead." And now she actually had no choice but to sit still and not be on stage. Her body became the boundary that she could no longer override. And so, even though on the surface this looks like a very shitty event, and it is a very shitty event for sure, but the deeper meaning of that event is that really life was trying to tell her, you need to slow down. You need to take better care of yourself. And this was kind of the first push in that direction. Now, I'm saying the first push because obviously being stopped doesn't automatically mean that you're changed. You know, life is just putting a block on her road and is asking her to kind of reflect and maybe slow down and see what needs to be improved in order for her to continue her career. But it doesn't mean that she has to do that, you know, because Saturn might have forced her to sit still, but there are still tons of ways to escape whatever you don't want to feel or deal with while sitting still. So this was really the first push, but it wasn't the decisive factor necessarily in her life. Now, later that year, she did come back. She did release another album and another single. She released Applause. And ironically, Applause is this song about the desperation for the crowds cheering, the desperation for approval. And it was this specific song that did not get it. The applause just didn't really come. Of course, she has a fan base of fans, including me, who loved it and who would support her with anything that she came out with, pretty much. But the general public was not buying it. And at that point, she was seeing her peers like Katy Perry, who were scoring still hit after hit. And all Lady Gaga would receive herself was criticism. And the success that she once had just did not come. The extreme image that once set her apart, the crazy things that got people talking about her before, it just didn't land the same way. And She was still trying those things. There were still some pretty controversial things that she did in that period. And people just didn't take it. People, like, there was pretty much only criticism for her at the time. And so you can imagine that this is a very difficult period in her life. And again, it shows that these South Node themes were not working for her anymore. Life was basically saying, this is outdated. We need to create something new. And that was also emphasized by another transit in her chart, because the planet Uranus was also moving over her sun. And this transit really puts an intense pressure on your identity. This transit asks you to reinvent yourself, to change, to become a more authentic version of yourself, to stop caring so much about what is deemed normal and to just express yourself as you are. At the same time, there was also the planet Pluto that was squaring the sun. So the sun was basically being activated from different angles. Her identity was being put under pressure from different points of views, from different planets. So life really was asking her to make a change, to let go of an old identity that was no longer working for her, and to be open to something new. Now, paradoxically, very often when we're asked to let go of something, we're gonna desperately try to hold on to that. So what you saw in this period during art pop is that Gaga was kind of desperately trying to hold on to this old version of herself, but it was just not working. And she wasn't given the success or the validation for it. And that was very difficult for her, and that was very painful. But the reason why it was happening is simply because life was telling her, if you want to continue living, if you want to continue building your career, if you want to feel a deeper sense of satisfaction, then something needs to change. You can no longer go on the way that you have been doing that the past 5 or 10 years. And so, again, it's kind of a blessing in disguise. Now, of course, it was fully up to her to decide how to deal with that situation, and it could have gone wrong easily. She could have kept holding on to that thing and went into the complete wrong direction. And in that case, I don't know what would be happening to her and her career right now. But the reality is that she did start to make changes already in 2014. So the shift, it already started slowly in the year 2014. So let's move on to the next period of her life. Let's move on to 2014 up until 2018, which I believe were the make or break years in terms of her career, at least. So what started changing in 2014? Because you can see the identity shift already happening around that time, because she did something that no one expected her to do. And that is, of course, pretty Gaga branded. She was always the person who did the crazy, unexpected stuff, but this was something that no one thought that she was capable of, I think. No one even thought that she would ever do something like this. Because Lady Gaga became a jazz singer in that year. She recorded an album with Tony Bennett, and then in 2015, she went on tour with him. And suddenly, the attention that Lady Gaga received was not for her crazy outfits or for the crazy things that she was doing. No, suddenly all the attention went to her voice. And suddenly people realized that she is actually a really good singer. And the thing is that she was always a good singer before, but no one was seeing through all of the masks and all of the crazy outfits and crazy things that she was doing. People couldn't look through it. And so the focus was never on her voice, the focus was always on the outer thing. And now, if we're talking about this back to basics principle from Taurus, that she's supposed to move towards the embracing simplicity, I think this was the first step towards that, because suddenly the attention wasn't going towards her crazy outfits or the crazy things that she was doing or the big songs that she was, releasing. Suddenly, for the first time in her career, she was recognized for her talent. And then I'm not saying that these crazy outfits and performances and stuff have nothing to do with talent, but these might have been more like masks for her, more like a safety protection mechanism that we talked about earlier. She felt she needed to be extreme in order to be seen and in order to be safe. And this was the first time in her life where she could realize that she can also be loved and recognized for something that is hers, and that is her voice. Because before, no one knew that she could sing. Couldn't people just couldn't look through her veils and through her masks. They only realized what a good singer she was when she started taking that off, and when she really started working on her voice and showcasing her voice. Now, this is also an interesting period in her life, because basically from the end of 2014, the planet Saturn is moving into her 6th house. It is then going also in Sagittarius, which means that this is the period of her big Saturn return, because Lady Gaga has her Saturn, her natal Saturn, in the 6th house in Sagittarius. And Saturn in the 6th house can come up in different ways. It can really bring perfectionism. It can bring a workaholic type of behavior, which can in the end lead to health issues that she has also been facing up until that point. But what Saturn really wants in the 6th house is to become very good at some kind of craft, to become a master of something. And for her, it seems like in this period, consciously, unconsciously, she decided, I'm gonna master my voice. And it doesn't mean that she wasn't good before. It just means that this is a period in her life when she started diving into this jazz music, and where she was basically learning to sing in a totally different way than she has done before. And I think this period in her life has been very important, and that her voice really massively transformed in this period. Because if you look before and after, you really can tell that her voice has become so much fuller and thicker, and she's just become genuinely such a good singer. It often still amazes me, honestly, but that is beside the point. The point is that for the first time in her life, she got recognized for something that was not extreme or intense or crazy. It was just something that was hers. It was her voice. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, aside from singing jazz music, she was still creating her own music. And so later she came out with her album Joanne. And probably if you're going to ask the average Gaga fan what their least favorite album is, they will probably say Joanne. And the reason for this is because it's the least Gaga-ish album, you could say. It is very laid back. It is really soft. It really embraces this back to basics energy. And her fans weren't super excited about it, but she herself said that she just needed to create this album. Like, it just needed to happen. And even when you look at the tour that she did for Joanne, even that tour was, for Lady Gaga's standards, pretty normal. It was still big. The stage was still very interesting, but it was all very clean and very classy. It didn't really contain the weirdness and the craziness of the previous tours that she has done. And what is also interesting is that this Joanne era was the first time in years where she again had a small hit, because she did the Super Bowl at a time and she sang her song Million Reasons there, which is a very laid back song and really not one of my favorites, but the public ate it up. The public loved it. And so this was something that didn't have any of the crazy stuff in there. It was just her at the piano, and it worked. Again, she was being rewarded for going back to basics. She was being rewarded for putting her voice first. So you could say by this time, she really started stepping into more of that Taurus energy. Now, I'm not saying that it was a completely easy time for her still, because I believe that she still went through a lot of physical and mental struggles at the time. And the thing is that that is okay. You know, it's a process. We're mainly talking about the things that were visible to us. So we can see how much success she had. We can see and hear what the music she did sounded like, but I cannot go inside of her and see what she was feeling, see what she was going through. That I would need to talk to her personally to, of course, know that. But at least for what we can see, she was stepping into that Taurus energy and she was being rewarded with success. Behind the scenes, she might have still been going through a lot, and that is okay. You know, the journey towards the North Node is not one that is, an easy one. It can often feel like it's like one step forward, two steps back. And this journey towards healing, it might even last a lifetime. And I think that looking at her now, you can see that she's made very big steps, and you can see that she is really doing a lot better, and maybe even better than she's ever been. But that doesn't mean that she's fully healed now. In any case, to finish my point, because we were talking about the collaboration with Tony Bennett, we were talking about Joanne. Those were all like the first steps towards this Taurus energy, at least in her career. But the cherry on top of the cake really was there in 2018 when A Star is Born came out. And when that movie came out, it seemed like Gaga was truly, truly back in the game. You know, that movie, and specifically the songs, you have Shallow and Always Remember Us This Way. These songs blew up. She hadn't had hits like this in years, and maybe I don't have the exact numbers, but it wouldn't even surprise me if, aside from Die With a Smile right now, these two, or at least Shallow, might have been even her most successful hits. But I don't have the numbers, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But the point is, she hadn't been this successful in ages. People loved it. It was everywhere. And if you look at that movie and those songs, you can see the pattern, right? Because you can argue that perhaps in this movie, even though she was playing a character, we have never seen Lady Gaga so raw, because you could see her with her natural hair, barely any makeup. The songs they were singing were very raw and real, and also they didn't have any of the crazy stuff. It was really, again, about her raw self and her voice. That was what the songs were about. And people just loved it. And I think, astrologically speaking, what I found so beautiful to see when I was researching this period in her life, we talked earlier about the planet Uranus, who went over her sun and really demanded her to kind of make a change in her identity, to reinvent herself, to do something new. This planet Uranus, by the time A Star is Born came out, was going over the North Node. And it's almost as though life and Uranus was saying, well done. You completed your task. You reinvented yourself. You have shown yourself in a more real and more authentic way than you ever did before. And now I'm going to reward you. And of course, it isn't all about the success, because I would say that the what this is really about is how she feels. And I obviously don't know how she felt at the time, but from what she was saying, she still wasn't doing very well. So the success in the outer world is great, and I do think that it showed her that she was on the right track. But I'm just making a nuance here to say that it's not the most important thing. It's just that this is the thing that we can witness, that we can see, but whatever she's going through behind the scenes, we cannot really say anything about that, right? But it was just a beautiful to see that this Uranus-Sun conjunction kind of asked her to reinvent herself, to basically take off all of the craziness. When I have a client that has a Uranus-Sun conjunction coming up, I might tell them to go a bit more gaga, because Uranus just wants you to go all out and just show like whatever crazy sides that you have. But the thing with Gaga is that she was already Gaga. She was already crazy. So for her, this Uranus transit wasn't about getting even crazier. It was actually about taking off all of those masks and showing the world the real her. And that's what she did at the time, and that's what she got rewarded for in terms of success. So I thought that it was like a beautiful, like closing almost of a process, at least in the outer world. And so here you can kind of see that life kind of pushes you into the right direction. Life gives you the signs. If you learn to listen, you will be able to follow the signs and actually move towards a better path for you. That's what her story kind of shows. Life kind of puts a lot of blocks on the road for her in order to rethink her life, in order to rethink her strategies. And then she changed her strategies based on that. And once she started doing that, life really rewarded her for it. And if you look at her now, you can just see how much better she is doing, because she stopped, living in those extremes all the time. And I think in the current era that she is in for her album Mayhem, you can actually see a rebalancing going on, because Mayhem was still very much fifth house Scorpio energy. It still has this darkness about it. And I loved it, and everyone loved it, and she had a very successful era. So again, this shows that she doesn't only need to, you know, she doesn't only need to take off her makeup and to just sing and to just let that be it. That's not the point. She can do both. But the point here is that she can create those extreme or intense things still, but from a healthier place, from a healthier root. And I think that is the change that we've seen in her, that she has a healthier foundation right now to build upon. And that is why she can still bring in the intensity, but do it in a way that doesn't break her. So, this is the story I wanted to share with you today. And this is really about finding a different perspective to look at the shit that you go through in life. And I hope that maybe this inspired you to look at the difficult stuff you have been through, that you're going through, that maybe you're going through in the future, that you will be able to look at those things not just as burdens, but perhaps look at them through a different lens, and perhaps seeing that life might be actually helping you out or pushing you into the right direction, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that there is something better at the end of the tunnel. So if you've made it all the way through here, I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it inspired you. And definitely let me know in the comments what you thought about this, if anything inspired you, if anything touched you, if you recognize yourself in anything. It'll be very interesting to hear. And then I will hopefully see you in the next video.